Really looking forward to giving this talk today, and I hope that everyone has made a lovely crash landing in Prague for EuroPython 2025. So, quick introduction. Who am I? Well, my name is Travis Hathaway, and this is the first time I've ever presented at EuroPython, so yeah. I have presented before at PyCon Germany, so it's not my first pony show, as they say. But who else, or what else do I do? Oh yeah, Python, right? I do Python programming. I've done this for over 10 years now. First got started in web, and now I do a lot of other things. I work on mostly CLI applications. And of course, I'm an open source enthusiast. Why else would I be giving a talk about communication and consensus building in open source? Another thing about me, I'm a wannabe rock star. I love playing guitar and pretending like I'm playing in front of sold-out crowds of millions and millions of people. Yeah, I have an Instagram account where sometimes I post these silly videos of me playing, so check it out. I won't tell you the Instagram account, though. You're going to have to find that out yourselves. And the last thing I want to tell you about myself is that I'm an aspiring German citizen. I've officially put in my application for German citizenship in November, and I'm patiently waiting on the answer. So if there's any German citizens in this group, please write your lawmakers and tell them that you want me as a fellow citizen. But only if this talk's good, so yeah, I need some motivation to finish it. Okay. So another thing I want to share about myself is that I am employed by Anaconda, and at Anaconda I work on something called the Conda Package Manager, and Anaconda supports a wide variety of open source tools, and I think Conda is the most important because you can't spell Anaconda without Conda, as we say at the company, and we don't actually say that. Cool. Okay, so let's get into the nitty-gritty of what we're going to talk about today. We are going to be covering first communication, and within communication there are two categories that I will be covering, and that is first asynchronous, and these include things like issue trackers, forums, and chat servers. And then we'll move on to synchronous communication, which is face-to-face, real-time communication, and these would include community calls, virtual community calls, and in-person meetings. And then on top of that, we're going to be covering consensus building, and within consensus building, we're mostly going to be talking about developing standards for your open source community. And so why do I want to present these topics today? Well, I believe that managing open source projects is just as important as the code itself. Because if you don't have a clear structure to manage the sort of how these projects progress into the future, they can become dead. Someone can give up on it, fork it, and then just copy your code because, hey, it's open source. So I think that paying attention to building a wonderful community by communicating well with them and building consensus by setting standards is very, very important. And the other reason I want to do this is because I've been working at Anaconda now for the last 3 years, and this is the first time I've ever been able to work on open source professionally. And I've had an amazing time doing it. I really enjoy my role. I love how diverse it is. I love the interactions with the community that I get to have at my job. And so part of this talk is simply me sharing what I do every day to help maintain the Conda open source package, or the open source package manager. So, yeah. Okay, so let's get into the talk itself. And today we're going to follow the story of a developer whose name is Jack. And in order to illustrate how all these different concepts fit together, I'm going to follow the story of Jack and how he utilizes all of these tools and communication mechanisms and standards to build a community of open source developers. So who is Jack? Well, he's a cat. His full name is Jack Catterson. He's a pretty chill cat, and he works for a B2B SaaS company in the laser pointer industry. With cats, this is very huge. This is a billion-dollar industry because in a world where cats can program, of course they love laser pointers. And another thing you should know about Jack is that he loves to nap in the sun, and he has just written an amazing open source project. It's ArgPause. And ArgPause is the fully featured command line framework for cats in a cat programming ecosystem. It has configuration management, logging integrations, and it's extensible with plugins. So this is an amazing thing that Jack has just written, and he wrote that while working at his laser pointer industry job. So yeah, and it helps their company, coordinate all the CLI's tools there. And so when Jack's company allowed him to open source this, he took a couple first steps, like a lot of people do when they say, hey, I'm ready to make my code public. First thing he did was he created a GitHub repository. After that, he cut his first release on GitHub, and then he uploaded it to PyPI. I myself have done this with my first open source project, as many others have done before. And so on top of doing this, Jack's B2B SaaS employer, they write an amazing blog post about his project, and it goes viral. More and more users are discovering the project. The stars are skyrocketing and just going up. Jack is very excited. He's just spinning around on the ground, and he cannot contain his excitement. Look how excited he is. And so Jack's employer, they realize this project is a great source of publicity, so they decide to let him and a couple of coworkers work on it full time. He is living the dream that I live every day. It's amazing. And so Jack has a first dilemma, though. Now that his project is live on GitHub, he keeps getting new issues and pull requests from users. On one hand, this is great, but on the other hand, he feels overwhelmed, and he has no idea what he's doing. He's never managed an open source project before, and now he's working with a team of people in the laser pointer industry. Those people are very rough. He's very nervous. Look at poor Jack. He's just sitting there, very pensive. So what does Jack do? Well, Jack calls up his old buddy, Travis. And I say, hey, Jack, what's up? He said, hey, Travis, I need some help. I know you help manage a popular open source project, and I need some advice on how to handle all these issues and pull requests. And I said, Jack, I know it can feel overwhelming, but this is a great opportunity to communicate with your users. So be sure to find out how you can stay responsive by incorporating answering issues and pull requests into your daily routine. You can't ignore these. And so Jack asked me, he's like, well, how much time should my team dedicate to this? And I tell Jack, this is going to depend on the project, but a good rule of thumb would be about 20% of your team's time. You can't simply say, you can't ignore this. This has to be a part of your daily routine in order to be responsive. And Jack tells me, hey, that sounds reasonable. We can always adjust later if needed, and as we add more maintainers as the project grows. So Jack and his fellow maintainers, they follow through on my advice and Travis's advice, and they start responding to issues and pull requests and begin learning more and more about their users. But as the number of issues and pull requests grow, they realize how unorganized everything is. So I have a couple other tips for helping keep things tidy. So in order to have a nice, organized GitHub project, or in order to be able to communicate with your users better, you want to label and categorize things so that people kind of know and they can read through the issues and understand what it is. So you can tag things as being a bug, a feature request, a support ticket, or a documentation-related issue. You can also use milestones to track progress on particular release cycles. So for example, you can create a milestone for version 1, version 1.1, etc. And then the other thing that you can do is you can use templates in GitHub to standardize pull requests and issues. For example, we use nice templates in Conda for bug requests or feature requests or larger documentation-related issues. And so here are a couple examples of that. What you're looking at is an example from the Conda project and how we use how we use labels. And so this is a normal thing, and this is a issue related to PowerShell. And you can clearly see that because we label it with the CLI PowerShell, We have it also with the label Windows. We use a type bug label as well. And I think another important thing that we do is we differentiate where it's coming from. So this one is coming from a community member, and we use sort of a generic community label in order to indicate that. If it were coming from me, for example, we would use the contributor label. And with milestones, again, you're looking at an example from Conda, and what we try to do is have at least a couple milestones in advance for our upcoming releases, so we can nicely organize stuff. And as you can see here, we have tags or basically version milestones for July, September, and then we have sort of a to be determined milestone where we kind of throw things that we want to get done, but we just don't know when yet. Cool. All right, and so some more tips for keeping your GitHub projects even more organized and clean. You want to keep issues, related issues grouped together in things called epics. You'll also want to use a project board to track progress. So these can be things like Kanban boards. And you don't just have to use GitHub for all of this, right? There's plenty of other platforms that all offer the same thing, just like I think a lot of you know. And then another really important thing that I see a lot of open source projects kind of skimming on is having a changelog and or release notes to track changes. And this is something that should be published with every single release. Yeah, GitHub makes this quite easy to do, but yeah, and let's go to the next slide because I have some examples to show you. So in Conda, this is an example of how we regroup group-related issues. And so we're using the epic tag. This is coming from a contributor. This is coming from myself. And as you can see, we have a list of tasks here that show exactly what has to be done in order for this epic to be completed. And we're in a lot of trouble because none of this has been complete yet. So, and then also I wanted to show you, we have an example of the release notes for Conda. And in Conda, what we like to do as well is we like to not only give the release notes, but then organize it by enhancements, documentation improvements, bug fixes. And I can't tell you how many times this has saved me, as someone who works on this project, to see when did we introduce this bug? Was it listed under enhancements or any of stuff like that? And as you can see here, one of the really nice things that we like to do is we like to link each item to a specific issue or pull request. So it's super easy to go and figure this out. And so the cool thing is that this is not only a communication tool, but this is also a debugging tool. And it's and it's also even for the developers. It's a way for the developers, the past developer, to communicate with the future developer. So yeah, communication isn't just about in this sort of time sense. It's also like a temporal thing, right? It's you're communicating with the Travis from the past, that kind of thing. So cool. All right, let's get back to our story. So Jack and his maintainers, now they have an organized approach to communicating with their users via issues and pull requests. But Jack still feels like something is missing. He says, "Hey, Travis, thanks for the advice so far, but I feel like we're missing out on opportunities to connect and communicate better with our users. Do you have any other tools you can recommend?" And I said, "Definitely. One way to not only communicate better with your users, but to allow them to communicate with each other. And this can be done by hosting a chat server instance." So Jack says, "A cat server? Yeah, sign me up." And I said, "No, Jack, a chat server, like Discord, Slack, or Matrix." So let's look at this. And so, yeah, as cats do, they say meow, meow, meow. There's a lot of meowing going on a cat server, or chat server. And so what do these chat servers provide? Well, they provide a place for informal communication, where the cats can talk to each other, hiss, and cough up fur balls. No, I'm just kidding. They're a place where basically not only the maintainers of the project can come, but also other people who use it can come in order to communicate with each other, help answer the questions. And yep, exactly. You want to allow users to ask questions and get help, but then this also empowers other users to answer other users' questions. So this is really nice. And it's also another place where would-be volunteers can reach out to maintainers. And so as an open source enthusiast myself, the first thing I ask myself is whether or not a project has a chat server. And this is where I go normally to ask about, hey, is the project currently accepting new contributors? And if I want to become a new contributor, what do I do? And I find that this is typically the best place to go because you're going to get the fastest response times. So much better than just, yeah. This is something that, for example, it's very hard to do in GitHub issues. Like you wouldn't create a new issue saying, hey, how do I contribute? No, that's definitely a better place for a chat server. And so here's a great example. Everybody should be on the Discord for EuroPython. So that's just what that would look like. All right, let's get back to our conversation with Jack. And so I told Jack one more thing. You might also consider setting up a forum website for ArcPoz. This gives you one more place to have conversations with your community, and it can be a little bit more organized than a chat server. Jack says, awesome. Just one more place for cool cats to connect. I said, yeah, Jack, that's right. That's right. So let's talk about forum websites now. And so there's two different types that I'll kind of break down here. We have what I would call the dedicated. And so these are the platforms like Discord and Zulip, where you can basically set up an entire site dedicated just to this project. And yeah, so Discourse is more so a kind of a paid option. I think Zulip is free-ish, I'm pretty sure. Zulip is also one of these, they also call themselves a chat server, but I would call it more of a forum server. So that's my hot take for this presentation. And then we have more of these usual suspects that surely everybody has heard of by now, Stack Overflow and Reddit. And the big difference in these ones is that on the right side, those are ones that typically are reserved for projects that get quite popular. Yeah, so let's look at an example of what this looks like. So Zulip, and maybe Zulip was something that I learned about, I think last year, and the Conda project is now using it. And the really cool thing is that you create different channels, and then in the channels you have these topics, and then in the topics you can sort of thread there and have conversations, leave reactions, all that kind of stuff. So far, I kind of, when I first was using it, I kind of had a little bit of a gut reaction, like, I don't know, I don't really like it, but the more I've used it, the more I've kind of actually grown to like it. So I definitely recommend checking it out if you haven't yet. And then obviously Stack Overflow. And then in Conda, what we'll do is we normally just will look for the Conda tag and check this out. And to be honest, I actually don't really look at this very much, but it's always fun. I get some fun surprises when I go look at the types of people asking about Conda, and I get equally horrified when I see some of the answers. No, I'm just kidding. Some of the answers are a little bit okay, but anyway, yeah. But most of the answers are pretty good, so good folks there. All right, let's get back to the story. So Jack decides to set up a Discord and Zulip server for ArcPoz and keeps an eye on Stack Overflow for questions about ArcPoz. He's getting more and more engagement. It feels a real connection with everyone he's writing his software for and his fellow maintainers. Jack is slowly building a community. How beautiful. So Jack comes to me, though, with some more questions. And he says, geez, Travis, so many great tools, but I still feel like something is missing. What if I want to meet members of my community face to face? And I said, yes, Jack, it can actually be pretty depressing never to meet anyone, especially those that dedicate so much of their time to your project. My first recommendation is setting up regularly recurring community calls. To make sure that most of the people can attend, I would use a video conferencing tool, and I would pick a time where the most people can attend. If you have community that's spread out across the globe, consider rotating these time slots. Jack says, great idea. We can pick a single time that works for most people and see how it goes. Looking forward to meeting everyone. So, community calls. These are now we're getting into sort of the synchronous forms of communication. But I don't know, I mean, I guess there's a delay of a couple of milliseconds even on video calls, so no, I'm just kidding. But okay, but when you're doing these video calls, what you want to do is to make sure you take notes for those that can't attend. This is super important, and it's also amazing because then you have this beautiful log of exactly what the community is talking about, and it could be a great way to sort of go back retrospectively and see how your discussion on particular topics is evolving and what's the most important thing. And the other thing is, I would highly encourage people to propose topics beforehand. So these meeting notes should be sort of, a template should be made at least a couple days before and say, hey everyone, please post a topic. This way you give interested parties the ability to first look at the meeting notes and say, hey, is there something being talked about this week that I should be a part of? Doesn't always have to happen this way, but that's a really nice ideal to shoot for. And the other thing is pick a cadence that works for your community. Some people might do weekly, some people every other week, some monthly. In the Conda project, we do this every other week. That seems to be a good cadence to pick. But I have to make an admission here. I never go to the Conda community calls. And you know why? It's because we don't have a rotating time slot. And every time, and I live in Europe and a lot of other people in North America, and these calls are always at 7 p.m. or 19 my time on Wednesday evenings. And I'm sorry, I love open source, but I don't love it that much. And I have a life. So yeah, that's something I'm working on with the community though. So, and I'm talking about it in our Zulip chat server. So remember, communication is key. And then the last thing I'll talk about this is that, yeah, publish these meeting notes where everyone can access them. A lot of people use websites. For example, for Conda, we have conda.org, and we post all of the community meeting notes there. These are also on GitHub, and yeah, and they're also in a couple other places as well, such as HackMD. So that's super important that you make these highly accessible. Yeah, don't hide them, make them public. Cool. And let's continue on with Jack's story. So Jack sets up his community calls and slowly start making connections with ArgPod's contributors and users from all over the world. So beautiful. Here's a little snippet of their chat. and with cats, and don't worry, these cats are thrilled. Cats make zero facial expressions, but these cats are all extremely happy, and yeah, this is what happens when you tell a cat to smile. But yeah, and as you can see, a wide variety of tabbies, so loving it. All right, so now we get back to the story. Some time has passed, and ArgPods continues to gain adoption beyond the laser pointer industry. So it has impressive growth. It has over 1,000 stars now on GitHub. They have over 500,000 daily downloads on PyPI, which is a lot. And they now have 3 primary corporate sponsors, so it's extended beyond Jack's company, which this is a super good sign for any open source project, especially projects that are corporately sponsored. So Jack reaches out once more to his old pal Travis for some more advice. He says, hey Travis, everything with ArgPods is going very well, but while the community calls are a great way to keep us organized on maintenance and feature work, I feel like we need even more time with each other. Do you have any advice for how we can achieve this? And I said, sure thing, Jack. While meeting virtually can help us achieve a lot, sometimes it's important for us to meet in person. So, face-to-face, it is the place where local meetups, regional conferences like this beautiful one, and okay, yeah, that's it. And then what would you do when you actually meet up? You would conduct workshops. For example, if you want to teach users how to use your software. You would also perform hackathons if you're trying to meet with existing contributors or recruit new contributors. This is a great way to do it. And then you also have summits where you can kind of get together and discuss the future of the project or any sort of other planning that you want to do. We had some lovely summits yesterday, including a couple that I was a part of for packaging and Rust. So yeah, these are really, really great opportunities. And for any open source project, you can always take advantage of these. And don't be afraid to approach people organizing conferences to see whether or not you could do that for your own project. So Jack and his community of developers began meeting in person. And while they were able to achieve a lot, they soon came across the last problem we'll discuss today. Travis, our meetups are going well,
but we're having a hard time making decisions and keeping track of what they are. Can you help us out? I said, yes, this is perhaps one of the trickiest parts of managing an open source project, consensus. It's important that you have a clear way to make decisions and record exactly what they are. Enter enhancement proposals and RFCs, otherwise known as requests for comment. And so let me talk about a couple examples in the wild. As I'm sure you all have maybe heard of, the Python enhancement proposals. But did you know that there are other projects that do that have these things as well, sort of as well as Rust. Rust calls them RFCs. And you also have projects like Django with their own set of enhancement proposals called DEPs. And you also have, in Conda, we have the Conda enhancement proposals. And these enhancement proposals are basically ways to solidify good ideas in the community. That sounds really vague, but what do I mean here? So when there is a new technical advance or there's a new way of doing stuff that people want to introduce, they need a way to first propose the topic, discuss it, and then have a vote on it in order to say, yes, we agree, this is the way that we want to do it. And so let's examine this process in more detail with a comic. And if you couldn't tell, we have Comic Sans, so obviously there's going to be a comic now. So let's follow this. We're going to take, and this is a total side trip. Just came up with these comics. I hope you like it. And I did, and just to let you know, I wrote all these by myself. I wrote these, and I made it in MS Paint. So, so first, this little stick figure has an idea for a standard that's very clear. That is a light bulb, if you didn't know. So you'll first have an idea for a standard. And then after that, you're going to want to take this standard to the steering council. So he says, my standard's ready. It's time to take it to the steering council for them to vote on it. And the steering council is normally, it's like the castle over there. It's this huge building on a hill. And once he gets to the steering council, though, he encounters a little bit of trouble. We're inside the steering council now. He says, and this guy with the furrowed eyebrows, he says, I slightly disagree with your standard. Have you considered these things? And then our hero of the story, I'm calling him our hero, he says, hey, you know, that's actually a good idea. I've rewritten this part to account for your input. And then he is taken in now in front of the whole steering council after it has been discussed. They say, we've discussed your change, now we're ready to vote. And luckily for our hero, congratulations, we have approved your new standard. It is now part of our community's practices and will be followed. And our hero is extremely excited. His standard is now common practice in the community. Okay, but what does this actually look like in reality? Because that's a pretty comic, that is obviously a cartoon version of that process. So let me show you. Typically these things start off, and then we're again in GitHub, and we're again in the Conda project, and we're looking at an actual proposal of a SEP. And so this was something that one of the community members proposed as a way to improve the performance of Conda, and in order to make this, the reason why they want to make this a standard is because we want all the tools in the Conda ecosystem to process these, to basically get these performance improvements in the same way. It's something called sharded repo data. You can read it if you'd like. But that's not super important. What is important is that it starts off as a pull request that would then add the standard to our standards GitHub project, which contains nothing but standards, nothing but SEPs. And so after the proposal is made, we have one of the members of the steering council calls for a vote. And also too, let me backtrack a little bit. Typically, as the standard's being proposed, it will go through rounds of discussion on GitHub. And so this one had lots and lots and lots of engagement. I think it had over 100 comments, which is a really good sign. It means a lot of people were very interested and a lot of people wanted to exchange their ideas about it. And that's a really, really good sign for a standard. And so, yep, and then so after enough sort of conversation has been had and everybody's feeling good, warm and fuzzy, a steering council member calls for a vote. And then the vote will happen. In the condo world, that takes about 2 weeks. All the steering council members have time to chime in. And then we have the vote can either pass or fail. And so in this case, it actually passed by 85%, which is pretty nice. So that means it's popular and people want it to become of community's best practices. And then after that, it's recorded and it is added to our SEPS repository where everybody can go and read it in the markdown format. So yeah, so that's an overview of how this process actually looks. And let's get back to our story. And so Jack says, hey, thanks for the great explanation on how this stuff works. I just have one more question. Who actually sits on these steering councils? And I said, that's a really good question, Jack. The steering council membership is normally determined by your project's governance model. In Conda's case, we restrict membership to a maximum of 2 people per major funding source. So for example, companies or nonprofit organizations, to make sure one funding source doesn't dominate the decision-making process. And I'm just going to cover super briefly on governance. This could be a whole other presentation, but governance guides the decision-making process, and it is openly published, and it's normally a documentation that you can read through and look at all the various rules for how to make decisions and vote. And it can be amended and changed, just like any sort of constitution or governance doc. And so let's get back to the story. And so Jack says, gee, Travis, that government stuff sure sounds super boring, but I guess it's important. And I said, yep, Jack, governance really is super, super boring. But it's really important that everybody has clear expectations during the decision-making process so we can avoid conflict and confusion. Cool. And then one last thing on governance. If you don't believe me on how boring it is, please go read the governance doc for Conda. It's very minute details, but super important stuff. So yeah, it's definitely not the kind of thing that you're going to read and be super excited about. But maybe, maybe some people do. So apologies if that's your thing. My bad. All right, so let's get to the epilogue because it's time to end this wonderful story. So 2 years have passed since Jack's last conversation with Travis. He decides to call him once more to check in. And he says, Travis, it's nice to talk to you again. And I'm like, Jack, it is so nice to talk to you too. And then Jack says, ArgParg now has a governance document, APEPs, ArgPod's enhancement proposals, regularly occurring meetups and digital meetups, in-person and digital, chat servers and forums, and well-labeled and organized GitHub projects. And to that, I say, also, he has milestones and release notes. And to all of this, I told Jack, nice, good job, buddy. You're making me proud. And thus concludes our story of Jack and his adventures in communication and consensus building in the world of open source. Thank you, everybody. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Travis, for that very insightful, engaging, and amazing presentation with a touch of humor. I'm sure all of us have a smile on our faces. And now I invite the audience from here and remote to ask any questions if they have for Travis regarding this presentation. We also have a Discord channel you could message.
So hi, thanks for the talk. I'm really impressed how Jack scratched everything together. I have just a quick question. You mentioned the changelog in the releases, and I was wondering, are you managing the changelog only in the releases or also in the repository in a changelog MD?
Can you say that one more time? They were clapping and I couldn't quite hear.
So there is the changelog either in the release notes on GitHub, and there is also a practice of having a changelog MD file in the repository. Are you doing both? Or just one?
And we do both, and we basically rely on a tool called Rever that does all of this for us automatically. And we do that by simply So it's actually interesting. So in Conda specifically, every time you create a pull request, we require you to create a news file. And so the news file will then kind of have all of that, the line item and the brief description. And so then when we go to cut a release, we sort of take all these news files, we smush them together, and then we put that in the changelog markdown file in the repository itself, and also in GitHub. And I didn't mention that here, but I highly recommend automating this process to make it easier. So, because otherwise it becomes super tedious. But if you can automate it, it's really, really nice. And you can even, I know some people, I have teammates at Explorer now even trying to use some like LLM models to read the pull request and then come up with a nice one-line summary, right? So yeah, highly recommend automating the crap out of that. So cool. Thanks.
Hi, I thought that when you were talking about forums and chat services, I think GitHub discussions should get a mention.
Okay, cool.
And we also use Gitter, which can be accessed to Matrix, so that's also a good option.
Cool. Yeah, thanks. Yeah, the Conda actually, we used to use Gitter and Matrix, but then we switched over to Zulip recently. But yeah, thanks.
Why did you switch?
I think we wanted a chat solution that would help us organize threads better. So you can see in Zulip where you can, Zulip is weird because it doesn't have like, it'll have a channel, but no main chat. So every chat is just it's basically just like a forum topic, and then you talk below it. And I think for us, with Gitter, everything was just sort of getting lost in a big sort of, stream of text. And using Zulip is a way for us to help better organize our thoughts. And yeah, I mean, so far, I mean, like I said in the presentation at first, I didn't really like it so much, but now I'm kind of coming to appreciate how nice it really is. So yeah, and yeah.
So with Conda especially, you have like Enthought, which have like paid trainings with Conda, and I know it's released under a license where if you have a sufficiently large number of users, it's no longer fully FOSS. For large businesses, for example, it's like Business Source. How do we balance having like 3 different primary corporate sponsors from having one company who mainly benefits from training through Conda?
Yeah, so that's a good question, and I'm going to answer that back, that Conda is an open source software, and the Conda organization is a NUM-focused project. So what Anaconda does on top of that is they sell services next to Conda, and the Conda community is supported by, I would say, over 4 or 5 sort of major corporate funders. So yeah, and if you want to talk about that later, I'd be more than happy to, because I think that's a huge misconception that people have with Conda and Anaconda. And I don't blame anybody. It's a very easy thing to sort of mix up. So yeah, but I will repeat, Conda is an open source project and it's under the MIT license, if I'm not mistaken. So yeah, cool.
Questions? I guess we can wind up.
All right, great.
Thank you so much, Travis, for the presentation.
Yeah, thank you so much, everybody. Really appreciate it.